Is this going to work?
Well, he's up against a heavy lift here. His legislative accomplishments up until now that are all economic focused, that passed the Congress in the last couple of years, focus on long-term investments. Voters are not going to realize the benefits of advanced investments in semiconductors or roads or broadband until, in most cases, well after the 2024 election. So the White House is really trying to remind voters at this point of what it has done. Those who don't follow the incremental bit by bit of legislation like we do here, and sort of promise them, change is coming, help is coming in the future. So remember that when you go to the polls.
We're trying to remind Republicans as well. We should let everyone know the president traveled to Chicago today to kind of formally unveil the Bidenomics theme with the signage and the flags and the whole bit. And he took a minute to call out a senator from Alabama, Tommy Tuberville, who was not a fan of President Biden's infrastructure plan 2 years ago in the Senate. Take a listen.
No one's surprised. It's bringing along some converts. People strenuously opposed voting against it when we had this going on. This was going to bankrupt America. Well, there's a guy named Tuberville, senator from Alabama, who announced that he strongly opposed the legislation. Now he's hailing its passage. Here's what he said, quote, "It's great to see Alabama receive critical funds to boost ongoing broadband efforts."
Complete with the sign of the cross, the president speaking to a press junket before a speech. Interesting here as he calls out Tommy Tuberville, who voted against the infrastructure bill and today sent out a tweet celebrating the investment in broadband in Alabama. Similar theme from Senator Cornyn of Texas, celebrating money from the infrastructure law that he voted against. There's the Tuberville tweet here to give you a sense of how happy he was about it. President Biden has decided to make this part of the stump speech. Does it resonate with anyone?
It's a tried and true position on the Hill to take credit for things that you didn't do and may have even opposed. All federal spending is bad unless it's being spent in your backyard. And, this is just another example of that. I think it's something that certainly got him a laugh line and resonates with some voters. I don't think this is a winning strategy going into the 24 election, but he got some laughs today, that's for sure.
A critical part of Bidenomics, which the president and his aides are really talking about, is not just about building the infrastructure at home. It's also about they're doing that to combat what's going on in China. And, Dan, that's what I want to bring you in here. This is really a critical part of the Biden administration when it comes to the CHIPS Act.
Right.
They want to make sure that they are ramping up on this type of infrastructure and that they're not reliant on other countries. But also what we're hearing is that they're also looking at potentially more penalties on China or not allowing U.S. companies to export certain material to China.
Yeah, I think that, we're talking about the NVIDIA news today, the news that the Commerce Department may take aim at some of NVIDIA's chips in a proposed rule that's coming out later this summer. And I think really what this is about artificial intelligence, right? And so the U.S. does not want China to get too far ahead of it in artificial intelligence, and it wants to be able to preserve its advantage in developing artificial intelligence. And so what it's tried to do is to allow its companies here in the U.S. to have access to the technology it needs to develop that technology, but also to keep China from the most cutting-edge chips. And so there's a combination of investment here at home, which is good for the election, and a foreign policy strategy of restricting that development abroad, which has the benefit of looking tough on China, but also, keeping those two things in concert.
How does that jive with the messaging coming from the White House? Secretary Blinken was just there. We know that Treasury Secretary Yellen is going to be going, that Gina Raimondo wants to go. This would be a Commerce Department initiative, right, to block the transfer of these cards, these AI cards that NVIDIA makes. How do you kind of reach out with one hand and say, hey, we're still friends, we want to do business together, but at the same time saying, but you can't have this?
Yeah, it's a very complicated situation, right? So I think if you look at what happened today, the news today, there's some adjustments that are being made. So this is not a wholesale new policy. It's just trying to capture basically some economic activity that may have fallen outside of the original proposed rule. So it's nothing really new from the Chinese perspective, although they had kind of a strong reaction to it, basically saying, like, what are you doing? Like, this is not right from our perspective. On the other hand, I don't think it seriously derails those broader diplomatic efforts, in part because China needs U.S. investment too, and it needs U.S. companies to be involved in China. And we've seen sort of a parade of U.S. CEOs going over to China. China likes that because they want that kind of business activity. And companies here in the U.S. want to make those kinds of investments because they want that market.
This is the one area that's going to be hard for Republicans to throw stones at, isn't it?
Yeah. I think Biden has really carved out a niche here for himself heading into the 24 election. And it's, but there is always this push and pull on who's tougher on China, which party. And
it's going to get worse.
Yes. And there's multiple tools at the administration's disposal and multiple ways that Republicans can attack Biden on this, whether it be on trade, whether it be on investments in defense, and whether or not the president is putting enough money into defenses to prevent any kind of war with China. So, so it is, there will always be kind of puts and takes here.